Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this plenary session. Ambassador Huntsman, good to see you. Are you okay? Everything okay?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I saw you on a very important-looking phone call a bit earlier. Nothing to do with North Korea, was there?
Almost.
Ooh, okay. Title of this panel, indeed, is The Global Dimensions of China's Domestic Growth. Before we start off, just want to take a very brief, unscientific poll here. One of the postulates put forth is with per capita GDP in the PRC at some 2,000 US dollars, Chinese incomes are currently a tenth that of Americans. Americans' wealth has come down significantly, but expectations are the country is going to overtake the US as the biggest consumer market in the world. How many of you believe this will happen by the year 2030? How many of you believe it'll happen by 2030? How many of you think that China will be #1 by the year 2050? I'll bet you we have more hands there. Okay. If I can indulge for just a second, I just got back from my annual trip back to my home on the west coast of America, and foreclosures, for sale by bank, cash for clunkers, and still there are so many clunkers on the roads of America. I got back to Hong Kong, where I live, and everybody's driving huge, gleaming new cars. There's more new Hummers on the roads of Hong Kong than there are in the United States now. And you come to even a place like Dalian, which I believe is like the 8th largest city in China, and you can see the gleaming Buicks on the road. So something is at play here. Something is very, very different, very, very significantly at play. I'd like to introduce our panel from my immediate right to the far right here very quickly. A very last-minute participant who just agreed literally a few minutes ago to join us with her thoughts, the Honorable Sarah Alade, who is the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Welcome, and thank you for being with us here today. Cho-Tak Wong is Chairman of Fuyao Glass Industry Group of the PRC, and will be joining us with some, actually he makes mostly automotive glass, so he'll definitely have a thing or two to say about our goings-on. My new friend, Ambassador John Huntsman, very recently anointed as the United States Ambassador to the People's Republic, former governor of the state of Utah. And we were talking a little bit this morning about the irony of a Democratic president appointing a staunch Republican GOP member like you to represent the country in China. What does that say about bipartisanship? Also, we're joined by Zhao Xiaoyu, Vice President of Operations from the ADB, Asian Development Bank in Manila. Welcome to you. And further on down the line, we are joined by the Mongolian Minister for Mining and Metal, Zorisht Dajdor. Hello. And finally, at the far right, David Lee Daokui, who's the Director in Mansfield, Professor of Economics, Center for China and the World Economy at Tsinghua University, very, very famous institution in China. Mr. Zhao, I'd like to start with you. China's role in recovery in the world, is it all that it's really cracked up to be?
You really surprised me. Why me first? And I'm not the right person.
You said you're in a hurry to get back to Beijing. So
although I'm a Chinese national, but I now work in the multilateral institution, which is the Asian Development Bank. To answer your question, I would say Asia as a whole would play a significant role in the path of further growth in the decades to come. Obviously, China is an important driving factor in all this growth. If you talk about growth in Asia, and you should look at China, India, and Japan as the four. We have a forecast in ADB that by year 2040, the 4 single largest economies in the world, 3 of them would be in Asia. They are, as I just mentioned, China, India, and Japan. So that from this, people can see the role of Asia as a whole in this role in contributing to the global growth, but it's obviously always the case that the United States is an important factor as well.
So what's the answer? Which way did you vote? Did you vote for China being #1 by 2030?
No, I didn't vote. I don't believe in this vote because it's highly hypothetical. But it depends on a lot of factors moving forward, what we do, how we do it, in terms of regional cooperations, in terms of trade regime reform, financial sector reform. But if we just talk about 2050 without having a clear roadmap for all these things moving forward, it's hard to say who will be number one. But whoever will be number one, the four economies will be the main driving economies.
Mr. Cho from Fuyao, welcome to the session today. You and I were speaking a little bit earlier about the role of the Chinese consumer, and you had something very interesting which I'd like you to share with the audience. You don't think that it's going to be an across-the-board movement in China. In fact, you think it's going to be very, very fragmented. What exactly do you mean by that?
In your outline, you mentioned that per capita GDP of China is only 1/10 of that of the United States, but you speculated that the consumption of China will overtake that of the United States. I've read about such statistics. It's a report that is circulated on the internet. Actually, the report is about the consumer group overtaking that of the United States. But the per capita GDP is but 1/10 of that of the United States. I think the intention of the author is a friendly reminder that is given to the Chinese people to indicate the importance of the wealth gap that is existing here in China. I think it will take some time for China to overtake the United States, to catch up with the United States, maybe in the next 100 years. We are about 100 years behind the United States. 100 years ago, the size of the population in the rural area in the United States is only 60% of the U.S. total population. It's about the same level here in China now. 100 years ago, in the United States, there were over 500 car manufacturers, and now there are only 3 manufacturers in the United States, automotive industry. So it will take a long time for China to catch up with the United States on the macro level, at least. Thank you.
Concerned about a growing wealth gap. This is an issue which has been expressed time and time again, something the central government is doing to bring about some abatement. Are they being successful at all, Mr. Cho, or do you think that the dichotomy, the differences are going to continue?
It's fair to say that we are seeking to narrow this gap, but it will take the efforts of the whole nation. And at the same time, it will also take greater support from governments and people around the world. It's connected with a lot of things, the policies of the state, and the people in all the countries. They have a vested interest, those interest groups, and there are resistance from those vested interests. And, but it's high time we do that, and the Chinese government is also quite determined to that, but it takes time and a process before this issue is resolved.
Governor Sarah Alade from the Central Bank of Nigeria, the need of China to secure its own future, be it resources from Latin America, be it resources from the African continent, has hit a fever pitch in the past several years. From your perspective, what has the implication been on Nigeria? And is it a healthy relationship? Is there some sort of report card that you might be able to issue?
Well, thank you. I believe it's not only Nigeria, but generally the Chinese influence in Africa is growing. And we view it as a, a sort of a win-win situation, a cooperative, cooperation, in the sense that, China has come with investment. They invest in literally, virtually all the sectors of the economy. They're in oil, they're, depending on which country you're talking about. And we also export a lot to China. So we see this Chinese influence as something that is going to be mutually beneficial. We are hoping that, because what we want is the trade. Like we have always said, we don't want to depend on aid, like most countries do. We want investors, we want countries that will be interested genuinely in the development of the country, not only buy the raw materials at very cheap prices and then export them back to us at very high prices. People who will help develop, to give the countries a gentle push so that we also can be able to hold on our own.
So not just a buyer-seller relationship, but more of a mutual relationship.
That's the kind of relationship we're looking at with China. And so far, I think that's the kind of what they have brought to the table. So we're hoping that it goes beyond just, so that Africans will not just be hewers of wood all their lives. We just do all this raw materials to the countries, and then we get exported. We also want to be, high up in the value chain, and then have a good relationship with them. And I think that's what they have brought.
We'll discuss this because this was one of the findings during the couple sessions in the Resource Summit today, and that is, mutual responsibility and what does investment entail? Is it simply a buy-or-sell relationship, or does it go beyond that? And Zoric, Mongolian Minister for Mining and Metals, hello. In many ways, your country is in the same sort of boat as Sarah's country, very rich country in so many ways. Do you share some of the same concerns that Governor Alade has just cited here?
Certainly, I think we are finding ourselves in a situation where the recent boom in commodities prices created lots of interest in the countries like Mongolia. Big, large multinational companies are coming to work in Mongolia. China, our southern neighbor, as well as Russia, our northern neighbor. Our third neighbor that we call, we are geographically sandwiched landlocked between Russia and China, but we also have our third neighbors, countries like United States, European Union, Australia, Canada, Japan, South Korea, with whom we're also experiencing a very rapid growth of relationship, particularly in this sector. So with regard to the Chinese companies, we certainly think that increase in China's growth creates lots of economic opportunities, growth opportunities for us as well. For the last 5 years, we have experienced an average growth of around 6–7%. And that was mainly due to the tremendous growth that China has saw over the last few years, particularly the increasing demand in commodities. So we can only welcome this, and we can only see this as an opportunity for us.
Where is is it a dependency relationship? You don't want to rely on one big customer, right?
Certainly, certainly. That's why, as I said, Mongolia has a very peculiar situation geographically. We are a landlocked country between Russia and China, and we would like to have a very balanced relationship with both of our, a healthy relationship with both of our neighbors, and the third neighbor, as we define it. So I think the issue of dependency will be resolved in many ways. One way is to have a very healthy and balanced relationship with all of our major partners, including China, including Russia, including United States, Japan, and South Korea. But also, what we're trying to do now to address during these times of commodity boom, and probably the returning commodity boom, that the prices picking up in copper and gold, we certainly believe so. I think the issue that, from the Mongolian perspective, the most important, how we can climb the ladder up in terms of the value-added production that we can do in Mongolia. How we can encourage Chinese companies, Russian companies, others coming to Mongolia to process more copper, iron, to have the final products, to have processed products, which will have a transformative effect throughout the society in terms of the skilled labor, in terms of the industrialization of the country and making it a modernized industrial country, and bringing the infrastructure development and all necessary change that comes with it.
Ambassador Huntsman, I have to admit that the title of this session today sort of stacked the odds against the United States of America. It almost assumed that the answer was not if, but when is China going to overtake the mighty U.S. as the #1 market in the world. Was I America bashing there? Should I be ashamed of myself, sir?
But of course, you're a member of the press. 你就是新闻的代表，就是这样的。
You are a member of the media.
Of China, at least most of the post-1949 period has been about pulling people forward. They've had some very unfortunate chapters during those years, but it's generally, at least since Deng Xiaoping embarked on his 开放政策, the open door policies of the late 70s, it's been about growth. And if you remember when Richard Nixon visited China in February of 1972, when he stepped off his Boeing 707 onto the tarmac of Capitol Airport and shook hands with Zhou Enlai, the handshake that changed the world, in my opinion. A lot of my friends from China describe that period as being 准备进入世界上, preparing to enter the world. And I fast forward from 1972 then to November of 2001. And I saw it happen because I was there as part of the negotiating team when China became a member of the WTO. And my friends from China termed that event 进入世界上, entering the world. So you went from preparing to enter the world to entering the world, and now you've got China on the world stage as a significant player. It's an inexorable movement forward. And I don't think it's a question of when it's going to happen, 20, 50, 100 years forward. I think what is important is the pathway, the journey that is taken. Does the journey result in fair market opening measures, in liberalization of certain sectors that promotes economic well-being and growth for more people than it otherwise might, and that we're able to enhance the standard of living for people not only here in China, but indeed throughout the East Asia Pacific region? That's, I think, what we should be more interested in, other than simply that question, will the Chinese economy be larger than America's at some point? Size matters. And you have geography. You have an ocean, a sea power. You have 1.3 billion people. We have 300 million people. When my parents were born in the 1930s, the world had 2 billion people. So they've lived through their lives to see a world of 7 billion people and the commensurate economic growth that has occurred since that time. We're going to continue to see growth. And how that growth occurs and how market opening measures and liberalization in generally then proceeds with that growth will be, I think, the most important part of the next few decades.
Do you think too much is made up to be black and white, either or? And I don't mean just in the media, but people like simple answers. Like this country is going to beat up on this country is in decline, this country's on the rise. It's almost like it's like a zero-sum game, which is a little bit misleading and not very constructive sometimes.
I think you're onto something. I look in this room and there are a lot of very good China hands, China watchers. Ken Jarrett is here, who spent his career in the State Department, was Consul General in Shanghai. I had a chance to work with him, to learn from him. I think he would tell you as well. The China relationship for all of our countries, and particularly for the one I represent, the United States, is so large and complicated with so many moving parts that you can say whatever you want about the relationship and chances are it's true, good, bad, or indifferent. So it lends itself very well to political demagoguing. You've got people right and left who will say this or that about China, and chances are there's some modicum of truth to what they're saying, but it typically at the edges does not serve our longer-term relationship very well. So what do? I think we try to do what most have done over now 30 years of our formal diplomatic relationship, and that is You know, of course we're going to have points of disagreement. We always will. We're never going to see eye to eye on all of the issues, but you have to nicely compartmentalize those issues that you have disagreements on from time to time, work them out on their own terrain, and maintain some sort of longer-term vision on a bilateral basis for problem-solving purposes around the issues that really matter, like the global economy, like regional security, like energy and climate change, like proliferation and nuclear security. These are issues that matter not just to the United States and China, but to every member of the international community.
The media liked to make out during the Clinton years that China was seen more as an ally or a partner in global growth, and then during the Bush years, perhaps more as a potential adversary. I mean, the tone changed a little bit. Would it be a disservice to put a label on the relationship right now? You're how many weeks into your term?
Yeah, I've been here 3 weeks, and you're asking me a question that could cause me to lose my job very quickly. But you know, Bernard, it's an excellent point, because you go through phases of the last 30 years of our relationship, and everyone kind of has a different definition. And every time someone tries to put a definition on the relationship, it somehow works its way into some level of political demagoguing and is unhelpful to the relationship. When I was announced by President Obama at the White House many months ago, I now know why they built the Oval Office. Bernard, you can't say no in the Oval Office when you're sitting in that room. And I was honored and delighted to accept the President's request. We discussed China, and we saw the world in similar terms as a result of the U.S.-China, in terms of the U.S.-China relationship. But I also said something during my announcement remarks, my acceptance remarks, that I think will be the most important part of where we take this relationship. And it goes back to an old Chengyu, an old aphorism from probably the Han Dynasty, I think it was, which was one of the more important periods of China's history, 200 BC to 200 AD, during which there was a lot of important thinking and philosophy developed. But the phrase goes something like, "Hu xiang bang mang, hu xiang xuexi." It's, together we study, together we investigate, together we help each other, and together we move forward. And I said that for a reason. I said that because everyone's always trying to figure out, a catchphrase of the day or a slogan for the year. I think when it comes right down to it, we're really going to be evaluated on how well we sit down together based on honest discussion and dialogue as friends and as partners, knowing that we're not always going to agree on everything, but doing it in the context of hu xiang bang mang, hu xiang xuexi. There are certain issues out there that are just so large and complicated, we've just got to tackle them together. And we can learn from one another in the process and problem solve in the process. So if you had to ask me what the what the catchphrase of the relationship is, it's hu xiang bang mang, hu xiang xuexi.
Your Mandarin is so impressive. Did you pick that up in the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, that's, 我刚刚开始学, that's right.
I'm a beginner in Mandarin learning.
Learn language by tape things. I throw it in the car every morning on the way to the embassy, and it's worked like a charm.
That's why we need to keep the auto industries healthy. David Lee, hello, far in.
Yeah, hi.
We haven't heard from you yet, and that was for a reason. Because you in your career have been an aggregator of opinions and weighing, all kinds of arguments on either side of whatever argument is the flavor of the day. You've heard many, many things. We've heard from Sarah on the global perspective of China's needs and who can serve it. We've heard from Fuyao. We've heard from Mr. Cho about what he believes the consumer rise in China is going to be like. And of course, we just heard from the ambassador. Just heard from Mr. Zhao how Asia is it's the Asian century, and of course the Mongolian perspective as well. Can you help us put everything together with some sort of a takeaway or something that we can remember from this exchange today?
Well, my takeaway is only one word from President Obama, from his campaign: change. I really think the China's economic emergence not only has already giving its impact on the world economy, including the current financial crisis. But more importantly, China's economic emergence is possibly showcasing a new model of economic growth and showcasing a new model of economic interaction between China and the rest of the world in the following sense. Number one, China is growing, and also China's growth is also helping the whole world's growth, like in today's recovery from the world's financial crisis. So through China's continued growth, right now, the demand for resources in the world is still there, so that the world's resource price did not collapse, right? Still is stabilized and still increased. So this is a major help. Also, through China's continued growth, China is also still having a huge amount of currency reserves, and much of the currency reserves stays in the U.S. financial markets, especially in the holding the portfolio of U.S. currency reserves. This way, indirectly, China is helping the rest of the world by stabilizing the interest rate, right? So these are tangible and intangible signs of China's economy helping the rest of the world. Meanwhile, I emphasize, we are witnessing a new phase of economic interaction, especially in the area of resources. This noon time, I just attended the resource summit, and there the discussions gave me a very strong impression that the resource industry is also undergoing change, partly because of China's economic growth. Why? Because today, in today's world, China's continued growth depends on stable and sustainable supply of resources from the rest of the world. Meanwhile, China's demand for these resources potentially will also help resource-rich countries like Mongolia, like Nigeria, by not only investing in this country, but also helping these countries to upgrade their economic structure. Also, we're also facing new challenges because China's demand for resources is through the purchase of our state-owned enterprises. Because let's face it, many of our resource-using enterprises are state-owned enterprises, and these state-owned enterprises are in negotiations with enterprises with strong government support, like in Mongolia, right? So this is a new challenge, right? We have a state-to-state relationship. But I truly believe through negotiations, through explorations, we are able to reach a win-win solution, not only for China, but also for resource-rich countries and for the rest of the world. So I really think we are facing changes after the financial crisis. And the changes are partly due to China's economic emergence. And I emphasize, China needs to be understood in this new pattern of economic growth. Thank you.
China needs to be understood in what context? Is the message management coming out of China flawed, or does China need to change the way in which it interacts with every other place it does business?
Well, at least in the following issues, I think China needs to be better understood. Number one, as a large country, there are a huge amount of domestic social issues. The government is busy with dealing with these social issues. The government is not only concerned with investment, with GDP growth rate, so on and so forth, as we heard yesterday from Premier Wen Jiabao, right? The number one concern of the government is there are social issues. So taking care of social issues requires patience, requires time, requires gradual changes. So even though people in China are very much aware of the general direction of change, however, the pace of change cannot be too fast. That's number one issue. Second issue, China's appetite, China's demand for resources can be resolved, can be satisfied in a win-win approach through better cooperation with resource-rich countries. Mm-hmm. And the third, another issue, may I add, that is China's emergence, Chinese people's living standard enhancement may well happen in a different fashion from the American and European countries. In other words, when we become rich, we may not, I don't think we will actually, require 2 or 3 SUVs for each family. We're going to enjoy our modern lifestyle in a more resource-friendly, in an environmentally friendly way. And in this regard, we also need understanding and help.
So you don't think China should buy Hummer from the U.S. then?
Well, this is a very interesting issue. My view happens to be that the Chinese acquiring of the Hummer is good. However, change should be followed, right? In other words, whoever requires Hummer should make fundamental changes to the engine, to the transmission, to the running of the engine of the whole car to make it much more efficient, right? To enable people enjoy a lifestyle of outdoor lifestyle, however, be less dependent on fuel consumption.
Xiao Yu, you've been listening to our other participants here. Does there need to be more give and take on the part of China?
Well, I've been thinking very deep while listening to this very interesting points. My view is that we were talking about who will be overtaking who, and who will be number one, who will be number two. I don't think that's important.
Okay.
I agree with the ambassador. I don't think that's important. Results is not something that we should focus. Rather, the process is more important than anything else. And what is important in the process? It should be a win-win solution. It cannot be one wins over the other at the cost of the others paying a big price. So, but how can we ensure this to happen? That will rely on the infrastructure, financial infrastructure, trade regime, and including cross-region cooperations, inter-region cooperations, country-to-country cooperations. I think in all these games, the key is a win-win solution through a collectively accepted or recognized process, infrastructure, if you like. So I think that's the most important thing. It's not really who is number one, who is number two. I don't think that's important at all, to me.
I'd like to address briefly the issue of China's attempts at globalization. You know, now that China has explosively become a very, very rich country with the kind of foreign currency reserves that it has made attempts to buy other companies in the interest of growing beyond its own borders and basically upgrading their skill set. Mr. Cho from Fuyao, you're a very domestic-oriented company right now. I believe 3/4 of your business is in automotive glass, but as we all know, the nature of the auto industry is changing. It's becoming a very global industry. A lot of countries are coming up with all kinds of neat things, not the least of which is China. How far have you gone toward thinking just outside the domestic industry, and what do you make about, you know, the last 5 years and some of the high-profile, at sometimes rather contentious attempts by Chinese companies to take over, say, U.S. companies, or even vice versa?
Thank you. The questions you posed to me, and the follows is my consideration is that the foreign currency reserve in China is very huge, but it doesn't mean that China is a rich country. I believe much of the currency reserve is under the capital account. Not all of them is under the trade account. So it's not the money owned by China. And secondly, about China's appetite for resources. Most of the products produced by China, they are exported abroad. They are very energy resource consuming. For example, we import iron ore and export steel products. It's all a processing trade. You know, this means that there is demand elsewhere, and it's only that the place to produce it is in China. For auto glass, I am a businessman. 40% of my products are exports. All the major auto manufacturers like Chrysler, BMW, Toyota, Ford, GM, they are my customers. in US, in Germany, Brazil, Australia, Japan, Korea, we have service centers. The reason I do this is because 40% of the materials in my products are imported into China. And China is very backward in materials. In terms of materials, 70% of the auto glass manufactured for the cars manufactured in China are supplied by my company. My role is a supporting role. So it's not good for the import and export is not a good paradigm for me. Whether or not I will invest abroad, so far we don't have the plan. Of course, I have a business in the U.S., in Japan, and Germany. We participate in the competition on the international market, but I'm playing only a supporting role for my customers. I always told my customers I pay a lot of respect for them. They have a history of over 200 years already. We are a latecomer. We hold them in high respect. A couple of days ago, a PCW PPG visited me. I told him that PPG is owned by American people, is in the interest of America. And I will pay enough respect to you. Of course, at the same time, we will compete with each other in a fair fashion. Of course, sometimes we win because you need to improve your management. So for me, competition is a friendly thing. It should be conducted in a fair manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cho. And his reference to PPG, just for the uninitiated, I believe it was the former Pittsburgh Paint Group, which became a polymer and a glass-related company. David, I'd like you to bring you in on this conversation for a second. Remember the Japanese model? Remember the South Korean model? 2 nations, 2 economies, devoid of natural resources, right? I mean, Japan is a beautiful place, but they don't have anything. So they started bringing everything in. They're the ones that were the original pioneer purchasers of things like ore and raw materials, and they became world-class makers of steel and electronics and that sort of thing. Is there a certain model for China? Does China need to take a sort of hybrid on examples from history as it expands industry? I've been doing some reading recently. There's been a lot of hemming and hawing, a lot of debate over is there an optimal model for China, and which way is the country aiming?
Well, I think so far it's fair to say China has unconsciously, I argue, followed the Japanese or Korean model of economic development. However, most people in China are very much aware that we have to change. After the financial crisis, it's very clear that China has to embark on a new pattern, a new road of economic growth. The difference between the new and the old one is that we have to rely much more on domestic consumption, fundamentally domestic consumption, right? Domestic consumption should be the fundamental driving force for future Chinese growth. Now, how to stimulate domestic consumption? Very simple. Income. The income share in GDP of households has to be increased. Currently, it has been decreasing for various reasons, which I don't have time to explain to you. The leading reason being that the productivity increase in China has surpassed the increase of salary, so that the share of people's income, households' income in GDP is diminishing. So from now on, we have to find a way to increase the share. Of course, this takes time. A general pattern of economic growth in the whole world, whether it's the US, UK, or Japan, is that in the process of economic growth, there will be a sustained period of time in which labor share of income would reduce before it's going up. So in the meanwhile, we cannot wait. What are the policy options? In my view, a very simple policy option is for our central government to spend more money to give back through various ways to the households, to increase households' income by tax rebates or direct income subsidies, so on and so forth. In the meanwhile, we have to incur a certain amount of central government deficit. That is okay, because Chinese public finance is totally different from the US or UK public finance in the following sense. Our central government has access to a large amount of state-owned assets, which, in my opinion, have to be reduced in the long run. So incur some budgetary deficits for the coming 5 years, and then sell some state assets one way or the other to make up the deficit. To me, that is a very practical and realistic way to go to stimulate consumption for the coming years.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, David just highlighted the difference and chose to highlight the difference between financial systems, say in the US and China, the whole balance sheet of the two countries. This is a very short forum here. It's just a 3-day forum here in Dalian. But again, some of the veiled criticism about what has transpired in America. It's been 1 year since Lehman, in case you haven't been watching TV. It's redefined the relationships, and there's still a lot of skepticism over what happened with the American financial system, and a lot of countries in the world are still kind of scratching their collective heads going, golly gee whiz, if that didn't work, what's going to work? Because it looks like what they were doing, they're doing once again, because we're hearing about big bonuses being paid by Wall Street firms right now. So what kind of a signal are we supposed to take from that? Boy, 3 weeks into the job, and look at the kind of questions you're fielding, huh?
Well, signals can be sent, and lessons can be learned from both success and failure. And I think every gathering of this kind, and every business school in America, and even here in China, needs to have a serious tutorial on ethics and corporate responsibility. If you want to go right back to the fundamental driver behind a lot of the financial trickery that took place on Wall Street, a lot of the financial instruments that were put together at ratios that were well beyond what any prudent economist would say was rational. You have to say that ethics is a part of what we all need to be talking about as it relates to building an economy. Participation from the ground up. David is absolutely right. I want to give David kudos. I'm going to vote for David for whatever office he runs for, because I think he's totally right in terms of where the work needs to be focused in terms of where China goes from here. But let's face reality here. We are looking at a future on both sides of the Pacific that is brand new for both of us. I mean, this is territory that has not been chartered. And we've got several things happening that are going to be extremely important for both countries. And there's no rule book that we can look to necessarily in terms of figuring out where we go. One of them is, the continuation of the communication revolution. If there's one thing that is happening here in China that is so different from what I saw when I first started bouncing around here 30 years ago, it would be the way in which the communication revolution is impacting politics and consumer behavior and practically everything else. And that's going to continue. And you've got 325 million internet users, you've got 60, 70 million bloggers who are communicating. And so for the first time, at least in my memory, you sit down with a senior leader in China's government and they say, we're being impacted by what we're hearing from people, and we're going to make a choice based upon input that we're receiving from many voices outside. This will continue to play out, and where it goes, I don't know. I don't have an answer to. I don't think anyone else does. The second is the energy revolution that is happening here and in the United States. And it will impact the way that we power our economies. It will impact the way we build buildings and transport ourselves. And it will be hugely consequential and significant. And the same thing is happening here. As I got on the airplane to fly to Sichuan a couple of weeks ago, I looked down after I took off, and rows and rows of renewable energy projects that were being built that was, proof positive to me that China is taking this sector very, very seriously. The third is healthcare reform. We're endeavoring to do something in the United States. It's a very tough thing to do. I worked on it when I was governor of a state, and we tried to put forward some rational fixes, some of which might work longer term, others might not. And the same thing has to happen here. If I could add one thing to what David said about an economy driven by real domestic consumption and demand, you're going to have to deal with the practical safety nets of society as well. So the population base feels confident to let loose with some of their savings and some of their money. And part of that is going to be insurance reform. Some of that's going to be healthcare reform, so on and so forth. And so there you have the practical aspects of healthcare reform, and then you have where biotechnology is taking us, and personalized medicine, both in the United States and in China, and the way in which we're going to be conquering diseases, unlike any other time in human history, conquering, the root causes of cancer and cardiovascular disease and diabetes. This is powerful stuff, and it's going to happen over the next several years and impact my own economy in the United States, and certainly the impact the economy here in China. And the extent to which we can begin working together on some of these critically important issues, I think is going to have a significant impact on where the global economy goes and who benefits from it, and whether or not it actually gets down to where it is giving rise to all people and impacting the common good, which is something that all of us need to have in mind, regardless of where we work or what we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Ambassador. I'm under the gun to open it up to the audience here. I did want to explore a little more with Zodek and Sarah about of course, the future implication about resource demand, because in many ways, one of the findings this morning in the panels during the Resource Summit was that China's global impact on the world is primarily resource-based at this point, as we've been discussing on the panel. Got a lot of people in here in about 5 or 10 minutes. I'd like to take a few choice selections. If you have any comments or questions directed at any of our participants up here. Got a floating mic somewhere in the room. Do I have any volunteers to start with? Ma'am, right here in the white, in the first section. Hello.
Hi, my name is Cláudia Trevisan. I'm from the Brazilian newspaper Estado de São Paulo. I'd like to go back to the title of the session, like how real can be China impact in global growth, considering the decrease of consuming in the United States. To which degree China can be a substitute for that? Or we are going to enter in a long phase of low growth in the world?
Who wants to take that one up? Mr. Cho?
我认为
It's whether China can substitute the US consumer. I think for the time being, it's not possible yet. It's impossible because we have a lot of imbalances in the Chinese society. For the consumption of luxury goods, yes, we're on a par with that of the United States. But for the majority of the American households and consumers, there is a great deal of balance in the purchasing power in the United States, especially with regard to the employees. And they have are soaked up the excess capacity from Asian countries, and China is yet to play such a role to do the same. It's not possible for the time being.
Can I take another one? I think there was one right here in the back. Yeah.
Ambassador, very quick, 2 questions. Number one.
Just one, please.
Okay, I forget about my personal curiosity question. Number 2, the between China and the United States, I think there are still a lot of misunderstandings. I used to do the door knock to the Congress senator. I found out the ones who are against China are the ones who do not understand China. Do you planning to do something to have more understanding for the senators or congressmen to come to China to understand it? Thank you.
It's an excellent, it's an excellent point, and this has been on my mind most recently because before you're confirmed as a U.S. ambassador, you got to have all kinds of consultations with people who want to tell you things about where you're going. Well, it may come as no surprise to most of you that there are a lot of opinions about China in the U.S. Congress and the business community, and I got an earful from a lot of people. And in some cases, as they would walk me to the door, they would say, you know, I'd really like to visit China sometime. And, you know, I would want to turn back and say, well, before the next time you give somebody an earful about your opinions, you got to get over and see China for what it is. Because if the last time you visited China was 20 years ago, it doesn't do. If the last time you visited China 10 years ago, it doesn't do. If the last time you visited China was 2 years ago, it doesn't do. You got to get over and see it for what it is today. It's transforming itself that quickly. Now, the value added that hopefully I can bring is I think there are all kinds of things that we can do, particularly in the areas of energy, climate change, harmonizing our science and the way in which we read and analyze and forecast the science around climate change is really done at local levels, universities, for example, and getting governors involved and getting mayors involved and getting local elected leaders to come over here who bring delegations like I'm going to have 2 or 3 of in the next week. So people can basically see China for what it is and begin to understand, not in Beijing, not in Shanghai, but in the heartland. And I think more of these kinds of not Washington to Washington exchanges, but local elected leaders and entrepreneurs who otherwise wouldn't have occasion to come over. That's the kind of thing that I'm going to be interested in promoting. And I think we might get some takers. I've had conversations with governors, with other local elected officials, and this is the kind of interaction that I think is going to lead to more understanding about China and less in the way of friction or stereotypes. It's a good point, and we all need to work on it. Business community needs to work on it. We in the embassy need to work on it. It's going to be a constant effort to encourage people to understand one another. And it does go both ways. But let me just end by saying this. I'm very encouraged by what I see with the younger generation in the United States. The number of Chinese language classes that are being offered in public schools, at the elementary school level, junior high, high school, the ability kids have today like no other time in American history to actually study the language, which is, of course, an opening to the culture, which I think results in better understanding. So I'm very encouraged when I look longer term at the kind of educational opportunities we're giving our young kids in the United States. It might result in additional bridge building.
And with a final nod to the theme today, that China really is the consummate consumer of a lot of things around the world, I just want to get a final thought from Zurich and Sarah. Both of you, in many ways, had sort of carbon copy concerns, and that was, we love your business, okay? Just to oversimplify it, we love your business, we love your money. Please pay us a fair price, but we hope that the relationship goes beyond that. And when we last heard from you, it was more of a hope. Did you have a specific wish list of actionable deeds, perhaps, that China could impart on your country? Can you start with Zurich?
Well, after the change of fortunes in our presidential elections that took place just 3 months ago, and the key word also was change, I was thinking that if David just said that magic word again, something will happen in this room actually, you know. But I think really, we have been talking about China's rise as a commodity consumer a lot, and for the countries like Mongolia, there are many issues that come with it, not only from Chinese companies, but in general. Because, just to give you an example, one mining project can quadruple the country's GDP. And actually the country's budget revenue can depend on a single company so much that the politics and economic life actually can be changed by that company. So for the countries like Mongolia, small companies which are resource rich, the picture is not all pinky and white. We have problems, real problems, in terms of control over our own destiny, in terms of the control our own natural resources, and how much control we can relinquish to the foreign companies that are coming to work together with us to develop those resources. So I think what can be done, this goes back to the point to the points that we have raised during the resource summit early in the morning, is that first of all, I think there needs to be a truly win-win situation where the governments can have revenues extracted from those businesses sufficiently to have social welfare programs running, hospitals running, schools running. And also I think it's important that the local communities, because we're talking a very high macro level picture all the time, but when it comes to local communities, villages, kids who are working, kids who are studying nearby the mines, I think this is where the tremendous radical change needs to come from the mining companies themselves, to be very responsible in terms of the social practices that they have in the local community. I think this is going to be very important, and this is what is going to define the future of the Chinese investment in many countries around the region. Okay. Thank you.
Governor, final thought from you.
Thank you. Well, first I'll just take a few seconds to contribute to that debate on who is going to be number one, whether 2040, 2050. To us in Africa, the number one country is that country that helps us to reduce poverty, the country that works with us to be able to increase the standard of living of our people, the country that works with us, to be able to add value to the products that we produce. That to us is number one country, and we open our doors. To the wish list, I'll just end up by using the same quotation that the ambassador used, except that I can't say it in Mandarin. Together, we move forward. That's what we want. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to our participants today. Thank you to you for your attendance.